Today, I wanted to introduce to you an app that I made, a game specifically, that I made for $0. I built this inside of Claude, Claude's web interface, which you can find at claude.ai. So I'm not using Claude Code and I'm not using Claude inside of an IDE, but just raw dogging it inside of the web app. I want to also say to you that I am not paying for a Claude subscription. So I'm on the free version. I do use Claude Sonnet inside of Windsurf. I have used the API in the past whenever I've connected to Claude Code, but at the moment I don't pay for a subscription. I'm on the free setting. If I press back, you'll be able to see that I am logged in. It's loading my chats, and yeah. So I wanted to kind of prove to you, shall we say, in a sort of a roundabout way, that I'm logged in here, I have an account, I'm not paying for it, and I've managed to build something, which I think is interesting, and I think that's something that people should do. They should try, they should see how far they can get on basically the free tier. However, I will caution, I will add, I will point out that there is only so far that you can get. There's a variety of reasons as to why that is, and part of it is context window. So if you've done any coding before, or if you've used ChatGPT or whatever, or even Claude, if you've had a discussion, you'll know that at some point it tends to get stuck and it doesn't quite know how to resolve the fact that it's stuck. It'll maybe repeat the same answer, or it will just not be able to resolve a problem that has. With coding, you'll find that it'll get into a loop, that it won't be able to produce the right answer, and it will continue to give you the wrong answer. And often that happens because context is full, and so it's getting itself in a mess. And of course, the other thing is that the problem that you're working on just may not be within the training set, within the training data, or any other data that the LLM has. And so it doesn't know what to do because it doesn't actually have the data in order to solve it. To some extent, things like thinking models can maybe get around that, but I always caution that there is only so far that you're going to get. So what I'm showing you is a very rough F-Zero clone. Whenever I was younger, I used to have F-Zero X on the Nintendo 64, so I thought, okay, well, maybe it'd be a fun project to see what I can do in terms of, can I build some sort of replica clone, and we have something kind of rough and ugly here, but it works, sort of. It does something, it kind of plays. It's not amazing, but hey. So there's obviously a number of issues with this. This was one of my first tests ever building a 3D app. I mean, an app with 3D graphics. So that's also kind of cool. The fact that the spacecraft thing that they have is the wrong way around. I mean, this got the wrong orientation. There's little booster rockets, or what's supposed to be graphically booster rockets, on what should be the back of the craft. I don't know if you can really see it. However, Claude has made that the front of the craft, which is just clearly wrong. And it did have it right in an earlier prompt, but it's decided to spin that around, and I've had a number of issues with it not holding the track quite well. At the moment it goes really quite fast, but it's almost too fast, which in some ways you might think, oh, that must be really fun, but there's something that's obviously not quite right. All this kind of bouncing around, especially at the sharp corners, and it's something that I asked to avoid. I said, try to avoid sharp corners, and obviously it's just ignored that, which is kind of funny. So that kind of also shows you about how far you can get with also pure vibe coding, which this project is more towards that just pure vibes end, rather than taking like a proper structured approach. If you want to build some sort of serious app with AI, you really have to take a structured approach. You have to have a plan, you have to put in documentation, and you have to continually check that the AI is building code towards a plan, and not just this, where it's kind of like, I threw down an idea, I threw down a prompt, and I said, okay, build this. And then I said, okay, let's tweak it, let's add a little bit more, let's change this, let's change that. It doesn't really work. Like, yes, I have something, yes, it works in the sense that it's doing something. However, it's not really a proper game, and I think it's going to be very difficult to get this game quote unquote completed within the Claude Web AI. I think I need to take this now to an IDE in order to finish it up. So, with all of that out of the way, I will show you how I started this. So what I did was I gave it a picture of F0X that I found online. This was on Google. It's actually a bit smaller than I'd realised, but I guess the resolutions back then were quite a lot smaller. I don't quite remember when it was released. I guess possibly mid to late 90s. I don't quite remember now. Was it as late as 2000 or 2001? I guess it's certainly possible. I'll be honest, I don't quite remember. However, it was a fun game. It was fast. It's got these sort of futuristic little spacecrafts that move around, and it was just somehow a really enjoyable game, and I enjoyed playing it. I played pretty well. I unlocked most of the things I think that you could unlock. I don't think I quite unlocked or did everything, all of the achievements or whatever, but whatever, you know. I did a lot of it, and I really enjoyed it. So it stuck in my head as a very good memory, as a fun game. And so when I've come to Claude here, I've said, okay, let's build a JavaScript game that resembles F0X. So it's an F0 clone in JavaScript. Aiming for a demo that has a track and shapes. You know, it's the race cars. And I'm thinking that I'll use 3.js. I've heard that 3.js is meant to be really good for doing 3D stuff. When you look at the website, you'll see some nice demos that use 3.js and they look really quite cool. So, and I've also seen a few on Twitter and maybe a few other places of people who have been able to create something really super simple, but things that look nice. Yes, they're quite rough, but it's just the fact that you can do it, and I think that's something that appeals to me. The fact that you can try to sort of put something together. What else did I say? I tried to describe how, you know, it could be like a U-shaped half pipe. As you kind of see now, you've got some sort of U-shaped half pipe here on the right side. It's something that took a little bit of time. Originally, it got it almost like the other way around. It put it upside down. And of course, you can see here in the very first prompt, long sweeping tracks with no sharp bends. And it's almost like giving me a sharp bend, even though I ask for it not to. And sometimes that is classic AI behavior where it does what you don't ask it to do. Let me take you a little bit back in time to how that first output looked. This is kind of one of the nice things about the interface of the Claude web app, is that you can go back to look at the previous versions. So this was the very, very, very first output, and you saw that little purple craft at the bottom there, and the fact that I can drive around this half pipe, although it's upside down as opposed to being the correct way around, which is actually, so I wanted it to be the other way around. And it's a short piece of track that basically just repeats. When you get to the end, it repeats. It's not an actual closed track. It's just it's jumping. It's obviously not great. I mean jumping in the sense of the progress from track to track. There is actually a jump button as well, which I didn't actually ask for, but it has it, and it may be that my ship is now stuck. Interesting. Oh, it's got inverted controls. Strange. Okay, didn't even realise. There's clearly something going on with the coordinate system, and I'm not entirely sure, if I'm honest. The very latest version is V75, and again, this has all been done for free, and it is basically vibe coded at everything. It's just, hey, let's change this, and hey, let's change that. But along the way, I've had a lot of headache. I mean, down here you can maybe see that I've been talking about trying to change the shape of the track such that it looks more like what we have now in the very latest version. And here we are, version 5, and it is better, but the actual craft is underneath, and it was a bit of a headache trying to figure out how do I get this craft to be on top. And then when you do get the craft on top, you'll have other strange things, like it spins around far too fast. Oh, what does this one even run? Some of these may not even run. This one runs, but you can see it's got all sorts of weird, horrible graphical glitches where it just looks wrong, and the craft is just spinning upside down everything as it bumps all the way along. It is a bit of a hideous mess, if I'm honest. And along the way, it's like it sort of gets better. Some of the things have improved, but to a large extent, I would say no. The game runs, they've smoothed out the track, and the craft is at least on top of the track. and it doesn't fall through the track, but it's spun round 180 degrees from how it should be. So I guess there's much to complain, but at the same, see this yeah, as you can see, here's an earlier version where the craft will just spin around and spin around as you're driving. And this is probably one of these classic things that an actual game dev would know how to solve, and it's just something that I've been trying to fumble my way through and try and figure it out. And you can see the little rockets on the back of the craft, and that's kind of, I tried to describe how the design of the craft would be, and Claude came up with something, but it's not quite what I wanted. But I continued to run with it just as a point of like, okay, maybe I can try to make the track better and so on and so forth. But it really is at this point where there's only so much more that I can do with this vibe coding, and that's kind of, I suppose, the lesson for this. It's, on the one hand, interesting to see what you can do for essentially $0, versus, well, I got so far, I really do need to take this more towards an IDE, a professional tool, if you want to call it that, where I can do a lot more management of the files, having multiple files, breaking things out to be in a more modular way, and then breaking things down into smaller chunks so I can work on each individual problem in order to make the whole game much better. And that's just something that's just difficult to do here. There's not really much more that I wanted to say on this. It was more just to show you kind of how things can go wrong if you are just pure vibe coding without a process, without a methodology, and also just to kind of show you what you can do for, again, as I said, $0. It's interesting. I think it's worth trying. I think it's worth playing around. This is like a really fast way to prototype and to try ideas with the knowledge that it will never be amazing. Perhaps further into the future, all of this will be easier to do. This is essentially just a single HTML file at the moment. One big giant file, which again is also not the way that you would want to do it, but it's just the way that it works with Claude in the browser. If you were to take it to an IDE, then obviously you can have multiple files and you can make it modular, and it'd be much easier to manage. You can't do that right now with Claude on the web. You can't do it with ChatGPT either. So that's something that needs to be improved upon. You can, to an extent, do it with Codex. Codex in the cloud will connect to your GitHub, and so it can work upon multiple files, but it seems to spin up a virtual machine for every single individual task, and that's just not really viable either. So it's nice for testing and playing and doing some sort of really simple proofs of concept, but it's not really a viable way to actually work. So maybe that will change in the future. Maybe it will be possible to have multiple files and so on and so forth, but it doesn't seem that that's going to be the direction of these cloud-hosted web apps and cloud-hosted solutions. You got to take it locally and work within your IDE. What I hope to do, I probably even said this by now, I hope I can possibly clean this up in an IDE and then maybe I can upload it to GitHub, but I imagine that could take quite a bit of time to do, and it's probably not going to be in my immediate pipeline. So I hope this was kind of interesting. I hope it was informative and something of some inspiration for you to try and take on some fun tasks, especially something which is gaming related, which could be naturally fun to do. So sorry a little bit about the rambles there, but I will hopefully speak to you in another video. Thanks. Oh, also like and subscribe. I always forget to say that. Thanks.